disruptive.
America that I fought for.
Weird thing to happen. Hello, one and all. Welcome to this edition of Kitz Corner. Hope you're having a fantastic day so far. You gotta love Dana Carvey, ladies and gentlemen. Dana Carvey, one of probably the greatest impressionists of all time. Like, he is just a fan favorite. I adore his comedy. I adore his work. And he continues to be an inspiration. Because just when I thought that no one was going to joke around, like we couldn't make comedy over the ridiculous pandemic that we've endured for the past few years, like how no one was allowed to make jokes about and how comedians kind of went off key. They didn't critique the establishment, except for maybe fringe comedians, maybe and by fringe, I mean what they call fringe, like Jimmy Dore or Rob Schneider or Roseanne Barr. I think that was another person that did the vaccine jokes about that. You never really saw anything holding back the establishment for lying to us and manipulating us and propagandizing us, and how big pharmaceuticals had occupying control and a tyranny against us for the past few years. Nobody really in Hollywood or the mainstream, centers ever really critiqued it until now. A little too late, but I give credit where credit's due, because Dana Carvey has a podcast with David Spade. I didn't even know about this, called Fly on the Wall, which between the two of them be interesting to be a fly on the wall. Two different style comedy would be very interesting to witness. But they have a podcast show, and they mention about Fauci and mention about COVID and the lies and the mandates and everything. And for once, the mainstream media actually turned a page to punch up a bit, which is a big no-no in the mainstream world. You're not allowed to critique the status quo. The status quo is the stature of the world. It's like a religion. You're not allowed to critique the status quo and the lies that you're being told by authoritarian thugs. You're not allowed to question a medical scientist who didn't actually pose any science to the general community to base all of his ridiculous claims. You can't allow to question that, or why Bill Gates is on television periodically discussing vaccines, with his medical background. Nobody really made jokes about it. Except for, Jimmy Dore or Rob Schneider or Roseanne Barr. That's why they had to go off, mainstream. They're, had to go to different territories. I'm trying to think of the other guy too. Jim Brewer had a YouTube comedy special. It's very hilarious to check that out. But Dana Carvey took it upon himself to impersonate Fauci, and this is, again, I give credit where credit's due. It's a little too late, but I give credit to the fact that for once, comedians are actually touching a very controversial subject, because while you get, Jimmy Kimmel or Stephen Colbert or Jimmy Fallon still endorsing big pharmaceuticals, and, Stephen Colbert with his vaccine limbo dance, like, it was just so insidiously insane. We finally get some actual comedy. And it comes from one of the greatest people in the comedic world. And here's what Dana Carvey and David Spade had to say about this.
I miss COVID.
I know. Dude, you know what I knew? There was trouble when anyone...
I miss COVID.
I know. Dude, you know what I knew? There was trouble when anyone that came to our country didn't have to get a vaccine. And I go, if you're telling me I can't go to work, but everyone coming in doesn't have to get one, I go,
well, once we found out when Fauci said,
oh my God, sounds like David Spade is questioning science. He must be very anti-science when he's pointing out the obvious hypocrisy. And that was a thing. That was a thing that made people skeptical, that made people question, made people like me question it. One of the biggest things that, I scratch my head out, and I wish I caught on sooner to realize this whole COVID scam that was cultivating the world, was they were sending charter jets to Wuhan, China, to pick up Canadian travelers and American travelers who were in China, who were under quarantine. They were picking them up and transporting them back home when they were supposedly infected with the virus. That doesn't sound like science to me. I thought the whole point was trying to isolate the virus so it didn't spread globally. So why are we sending charter jets to pick up people in a quarantine nation? And if we didn't do that, maybe the quarantine would only be in Wuhan, China. I'm not a scientist, but I'm just saying that seems kind of hypocritical. That we're trying to contain the virus, we're trying to control it, we're trying to, stop it from spreading, but yet we're picking up people that supposedly are infected with this contagious disease and shipping them back here so they can infect our areas. That was one of the big things. But then I got the Pfizer shot, and then I got my second shot, and I got vaccine injured by it, and now things... Once I took a peek behind the curtain, that's when I realized that, okay, there's way more that needs to be discussed that is completely silenced out for obvious reasons, and that's because big pharmaceuticals are a cartel used to oppress people. They're not in it for health or safety or the well-being of society. They're in it for the money, obviously. I should have trusted my instinct, and I kick myself every time, but at least I can laugh with Dana Carvey and people. But take a look at this.
Said, okay, I'm sorry, but if you've had 2 boosters and 2 vaccines, you can get and give COVID to another guy who's had 5 vaccines and 4 boosters. Mm-hmm. What's the difference between a vaccine and a booster? I don't know. It's just more vaccine, but booster sounds better. Anyway, a guy with 25 vaccines would get and give COVID to another guy with 25 vaccines. That's why I'm introducing the daily COVID shot. Every day you get a shot. By the time you get to your car, you got no immunity. But it's a beautiful 39 seconds.
Man. Oh, my God. That takes real skill, ladies and gentlemen. I don't know how people do that. I don't know how people can just look at a person. I guess you have to really analyze that person in order to make an impersonation, a really good impersonation. And I try... I'm not the greatest at impersonations. I try, though. Some people say I have a really good Dr. Phil. You got to understand. You got to understand and listen to me. Deep down, you're not a monster. You're only a monster because your father was a drunk. Now, I'm here to help me, help you, help me, help you, help me, help you. Not great, but working on it. Or Trump, fantastic, China. But that was interesting. That was interesting, and that's the kind of I wish we had more of this. I wish we had more of this, and I wish Dana Carvey, and I know that the reason that they're doing this is because they're obviously still intact with Hollywood. They're still intact with the mainstream spotlight, so they can't go as in further detail as someone like Jim Brewer or Jimmy Dore. They can't go on fully and say how ridiculous it was when the New York Times told its own readers not to read, which I still am laughing myself. That's probably the most hilarious thing, and I would still laugh about it to my eventual grave, that there was a moment in time where the New York Times, the biggest publication on the face of the earth, told its own readers not to read. Don't look into things. Don't learn things, because learning is awful. Okay, kids? Don't read. Don't learn. Just comply. And every time I read that, it makes me think of like a Looney Tunes cartoon with Foghorn Leghorn. Like, hey boy, what you reading for? Don't you know that all the reading's been done by smart people, so you don't have to? Why are you educating myself? And the reason for that is because they don't want people to know what a scam it was. And we're finally getting information on that. including new release documents and new emails showing that COVID vaccine mandates were based on a lie. That was what was been addressed by the CDC, and they've lied since even the release of these emails that have proven that this was factless, that this was completely unscientific. There was no evidence to prove that the mandates were effective. In fact, there was study after study after study. The National Post even did a article saying that the mandates and forced lockdowns were actually ineffective and actually did poorly on people when it came to physical fitness, when it came to mental anxieties, when it came to suicides, when it came to mental health, when it came to children. Keeping children away from school actually made kids worse. There was more studies against the mandates than there were supporting it. And even after all that information has finally been released to the public, they're doubling down on the lies. Because that is literally all they have left. Everybody knows what scam artists they are, what pathetic sociopathic liars, pathological liars they are, and they have nothing anymore. They have nothing. They have been completely exposed of what frauds they are, from Anthony Fauci to Bill Gates to Collins to the people at the CDC to the FDA that's been corrupted by pharmaceutical giants to oh God, what's the Pfizer CEO's name? The veterinarian. Albert Bola. You've been exposed for a fraud. So, and this is something that, again, we knew about prior. We knew about this for a while now, but it's nice to see that finally mainstream Dana Carvey and David Spade, at least on their podcast, is finally seeing the light. They're finally seeing that it is just, it's a joke. It is a joke on what we have endured for the past 3 years. And more so on this ridiculous roller coaster. So I just want to show people and remind people, Dana Carvey's impersonation of Fauci was pretty spot on. Pretty spot on. Not only just on the voice and the temper of his voice, but what a kind of personality he was. And how he was a pathetic, pathological liar. He was a serial liar on a national front. And he tried to exploit that to the rest of the world. And considering that Fauci, what we know about him, what he's been, what we exposed this person to be, it still amazes me that there is still people, there are still celebrities, there are still comedians, there are still actors and actresses and authors and social media influencers that still praise this guy and praise his substitute, Peter Hotez, who's an even more pathetic excuse of a buffoon, of a fraud. And this is all the lies that Fauci has spewed throughout this pandemic, and why he was exposed by multiple people of the fraud that he is.
Criticizing science because I represent science.
If you're vaccinated, you really don't need to worry about getting it in a way that's serious or transmitting it.
That is true. That is correct, Chris. It'll either protect you completely against infection, and the chances are very likely that you'll not be able to transmit it to other people. The risk is extremely low of transmitting it to anybody else. Full stop. Vaccinated people are clearly capable of transmitting the infection. When you're in the middle of an outbreak, wearing a mask might make people feel a little bit better. If people are not wearing masks, then maybe we should be mandating it. I often myself wear 2 masks.
And I'm quoting you now, at the population level, masks work at the margins maybe 10%. To hear that they only work at the margins, maybe 10% would make a lot of people ask, okay, then why was I wearing a mask?
You're really attacking not only Dr. Anthony Fauci, you're attacking science. When you say that this is going to go away tomorrow like magic, when you know that there's no chance it's going to just disappear.
We hope this just goes away, burns itself out.
So my question is, why weren't you straight with the American people about this to begin with?
So the bottom line is, it's a guesstimate. I gave a range.
It seemed in that quote to suggest that you were basing your recommendation on polling and what people could accept. Is that not what you meant?
No, I mean, it's a bit of that.
We're seeing all of these school closures around the country. Is that the right move for children and families?
And I think what's going on right now is generally an appropriate approach. You want to start doing something to socially distance yourself. How dramatic that is, closing schools and doing other things, should be proportionate.
It went too far, that particularly for kids who couldn't go to school except remotely, that it's forever damaged them.
Well, I don't think it's forever irreparably damaged anyone.
The U.S. Surgeon General has called it an urgent public health crisis, a devastating decline in the mental health of kids across the country. According to the CDC, the rates of suicide, self-harm, anxiety, and depression are up among adolescents.
And the record will show, Neil, that we didn't recommend shutting everything down.
First of all, I didn't recommend locking anything down. I recommended to the president that we shut the country down. And that was a very difficult decision because I knew it would have serious economic consequences, which it did.
Yeah. Because if you look at the people that are politicizing me, there's somebody that all the way over on one level. But there are a lot of other people who look upon me the way they should, as a non-political person that I am. They're not.
Thank God. Thank God we can make jokes about this, because if I can't laugh at this, I'm angered by this. And you should be angered by this. You should be angered by the fact that we have been not only physically tortured, but psychologically tortured through this. Like, people don't understand the magnitude that it had an effect on people, not only with young kids and their mental health, that they were excluded away from school, they couldn't see their friends, but there was people that lost their businesses, they lost their livelihoods, they had no financial stability, they were forced to ride it out on one small check when everything was inflating, everything had gone through the roof, cost of living was skyrocketing through that time period, and they were told to ride it out. They were told to stay home, stay, locked down, and the government is going to help you. Which we all know, especially after this, we all know that's a big, giant lie. That is a big, giant lie that the government is going to provide for you when you lock your business down, when you lock your house down. That was a complete absurd lie. And look at what happened with the CARES Act. Look what happened with all the supposed care packages, that these COVID lockdowns. Oh, we got to save the people. But first we got to send $5 trillion, that's trillion with the T, to Wall Street. Because the big banks that were already cashing in on COVID and making record profits, investing in stay-at-home technology, investing in Zoom, investing in online learning, the ones that were already making high amounts of profit during COVID, which they got like hundreds of new billionaires off it, they had to give them more money. And what'd you get? Crumbs. You probably got evicted. You're told to ride it out. You were told that if you caught COVID and go to the hospital, you had to suffer medical debt and homelessness. You had to lose your business. You had to lose your livelihood. You could have been arrested. While the rest of the mainstream media and mainstream comedians were telling you that if you questioned this, or if you had a different opinion, or if you didn't comply with an experimental vaccine, that you were an idiot, you were racist, you were bigoted, you were xenophobic, you were homophobic, you're a Nazi, white supremacist, fascist, that deserve to die in the streets. And I'm not making this up. This is like wording that Jimmy Kimmel said on national television. A guy who was supposedly for instituting healthcare for everybody, told unvaccinated people that didn't want to comply with this experimental drug, that you had to go on the streets then. Go die in the streets because I don't want you clogging our hospitals with your sickness. I don't want your kind around me. Which, as Rob Schneider points out, take unvaccinated and just substitute that with, say, Jewish people or Palestinians or Muslims or Arabs. It kind of just has that, fascist kind of tone to it when you're discriminating a huge portion of society away from the rest of society. You segregate people. You fear-mongered people. You told them that they are not allowed in an acceptable society. Like I said, at least we can laugh. Because I'm pissed off. And I'm sure you are too. And I wish that more comedians had the moxie, had the balls, had the cojones to preach what Dana Carvey said or what Jimmy Dore has been saying on how ridiculous, how nefarious this was, how much of a pathetic shrill this Anthony Fauci was to the people, and what an absolute joke Peter Hotez is. That he doesn't want to debate for the good of science. I don't want to go and have a conversation with a podcaster discussing my arguments for the sake of science. Or how about when Anthony Fauci said this? This is when he did his misinformation campaign. And there was a moment where he did an interview here, and he was telling ordinary Americans that were going to do their own research or, look at a different opinion, which is what patients should be allowed to do. That was kind of the whole point of medical sciences, is that you, as a patient, you had the final say. A doctor can maybe recommend something to you, but you're allowed to get a second opinion. You're allowed to research these things because it's your body, it's your choice. What happened to that? What happened to that? COVID happened. Tyranny happened. The big pharmaceuticals dominated over you and dominated over actual information that would have been useful to people. So this is what Fauci said.
Do not accept and shrug your shoulders at the normalization of untruths, because we're living in an era.
Do not accept the normalization of untruths. What does that even mean? Do not accept lies? Is that what you're saying? Because that's what we've been doing for the past few years. That has been our culture for the past 3+ years. Through this pandemic, we normalized lies, and it hurt a lot of people. We screamed at family members. We screamed at neighbors and friends and other members of the community for not complying with this agenda. Like, it's just the absurdity of that. Do not accept the normalization of untruths. While you're trying to tell people, accept the normalization of untruths, our untruths. Because you had no scientific evidence, you didn't disclose anything to the people, you didn't provide information or context to people, which is why people started questioning it. They started questioning when you were hiding information away from people. Concerning that you said this vaccine was safe and effective, at the same time hiding the information for 75 years, people are going to scratch their heads and go, that does not seem right. Something must be up.
Now, there's so much distortion of reality, outright fabrication, lying, conspiracy theories, that it's so prevalent that people sort of shrug their shoulders and say, well, nothing to do about it, it's the new normal. No, do not accept that as the new normal, because whenever you have...
Yeah, people, that was our thing. That was our thing. Why does other people have to contradict with my own personal philosophy of lying and misguiding people? Come on. I'm like the Robert De Niro of medical sciences right here. I am the godfather of COVID. Come on. You don't want to wake up with a horse's head in your bed. Come on. I'm supposed to provide the untruths. I'm supposed to conspire with the governments to bring you misinformation. And then you're just supposed to sit there and take it. Don't read into things. Don't look into things. Come on. What do you think you are? A reader? A researcher? You think you're going to be so smart to figure this out? It's still one of the most hilarious takes of this entire pandemic. Like I said, I'm going to laugh about it till my eventual death. About how absurd that is.
The acceptance of untruths and distortions. Ultimately, it's going to erode at the foundation of the social order and our democracy. And I think history...
And you don't think segregating people, telling people that they can't allow to be in restaurants and see their own family members and go to a park isn't a danger to society or democracy? You think telling people that they are the worst people imaginable, that they're not complying with this telling them that they're despicable is not a threat to society and democracy? How fast did they fill in parks with sand? How fast did they tell police officers to crack the heads of people that just wanted to go outside and take a walk? How is that? Again, thank God for Dana Carvey. Thank God for comedians to make jokes about this. And if I couldn't make jokes about this, I'd be showing all my rage to this. I'm trying to be positive. I'm trying to be optimistic and trying to pass this through, but holy crap. There's a lot. People don't realize there's deep there's deep conspiracy and lies and manipulation and deep amount of corruption that this all prevails and that we're finally being exposed to, because finally people have woken to providing context and giving us information and actually giving us scientific inquiries into their baseless claims, which is what science tells us to do. That's the whole purpose of the scientific method. You have to provide evidence. You have to show evidence. You have to check these theories. You come up with a theory, and then you do data. Then you do analysis. Then you do testing. And you try to prove that theory. You always question science. Everybody's been doing it since Galileo and Einstein and Nikola Tesla to Thomas Edison to Leonardo da Vinci to I was going to say Bill Nye the Science Guy. That was stupid. Neil deGrasse Tyson. Let's go with that. Anyone who's ever been in the scientific community has always met with criticism. But we couldn't criticize this guy. That doesn't seem suspicious to you? Or the fact we couldn't criticize Bill Gates? I still, again, what credentials does a tech billionaire have when it comes to people's health? The same credentials that makes him an agricultural expert that owns the most farmland. He thinks that has nothing to do with farming. He thinks that has nothing to do with helping people. And I'd be right about that. And the fact that we normalized this and no one talked about this conspiracy for the longest time. They were trying to hide this as much as possible. Even Fauci doubling down when Rand Paul exposed the fact that Anthony Fauci not only is a pathological liar when it came to the response of COVID, but potentially was the cause of this virus. And how we were not allowed to question the origin of this virus. Because if we knew about the origin of the virus, maybe we'd understand how to actually control it and containment and actually understand more about this virus and make people safer. But we did not do that. We did not know about this virus because no one was actually providing scientific inquiries on this. And if they did, they would realize that, hey, by the way, Anthony Fauci has done gain-of-function research. Hey, there is a coronavirus laboratory in the place that they discovered coronavirus. And there's only very few people, very few people that could say any of this. I mean, even when Jon Stewart did that bit about the Wuhan lab leak and people like Stephen Colbert trying to smack that down, and Jon Stewart just went with it, and Jon Stewart did a great job with that bit. Now he's trying to cover himself up. Now he's trying to say, like, oh, I never said that. Because he knows that big pharmaceuticals are going to capture his business. They take over and dominate every aspect of the media. In order to win brownie points and make a career move for himself, he has to kiss up to the cartels. He has to kiss up to people like Fauci. Or I guess, I guess with Dana Carvey, I mean, he's done a lot of movies and Saturday Night Live, and I'm sure he's raking in cash already, so why not just question it? Why not just come forward and be like how stupid this was for 3 years, the pathological lies and hypocrisy just under our noses? Why not just say it for the sake of comedy? That's what I would say. Because if we can't laugh at this, I'm just going to get more and more angered. Because I am angry about this. I am angry that for 3+ years, we have heard nothing but lies. And I wish I knew a little bit sooner than I did, but better late than never. And at least I could say that with Dana Carvey. It's way past due for comedians to actually speak up. But kudos on him. Kudos on David Spade for mentioning this on their podcast. And it's a pretty spot-on impression. Party on.